Hello everyone, and welcome back to the channel. I am your host Muriel, and in this video we're going to do something a little different and something I'm very excited about, because today I will be discussing books, and more specifically the First Law trilogy on its own and in relation to other works of high or epic, or at the very least secondary world fantasy, with my bestest bookish friend, Paramita, because whilst it is certainly loads of fun to analyze, critique, discuss books on one's own, it is also loads of fun to do the same thing with one's friends, am I right? So on that note, welcome Paramita. For starters, would you like to introduce yourself?
Yes, thank you so much, Muriel. My name is Paramita. I'm from India. I am a bookworm and I like to read in a variety of genres. Right now, I'm mostly reading what would be shelved as literary fiction or general fiction, fantasy, and classics. But I also like to read science fiction, historical fiction, sometimes biographies. So Muriel and I have quite a lot in common. But I also have found many, many great recommendations from her channel. Her BookTube channel is what introduced me to a large part of science fiction. And so gradually then I started following the channel, then I joined her Discord. And then gradually we decided to sort of try this thing. So I'm very excited, and thank you so much for having me.
My great pleasure. And so yeah, thank you for that introduction. And as you pointed out, there's definitely a not insignificant overlap in our reading tastes. We share a lot of genres in common, though it is true you probably read a fair bit more general fiction and classics than I do. We share some favorites, like A Song of Ice and Fire, Legendarium. Those two will be relevant in this specific video, but then we also love the Southern Reach trilogy. We both really, I think I probably loved it a bit more than you did, but Hollow Kingdom by Kier Jane Buxton, etc., etc. And we also share some, what I'll generously term, thorough dislikes, like Infinite Jest, The Book of the New Sun, Blindside, and so on and so forth. But then I think you'll also agree that we diverge in our reading tastes, or more specifically in the way we approach the elements that go into a work of literary fiction. I've mentioned this with you before. I like to talk about something called the hierarchy of literary needs. Mm-hmm. Mine, for instance, when it comes to speculative fiction, which is what I read the most of, I am an ideas and concept-driven reader. I prioritize themes or theming and world-building. Then I think comes plot, and then character work, and then prose. I think prose and character work are on a similar level. Then with general fiction or non-speculative fiction, world-building isn't really relevant, so it's more theming, then character work, then prose. I think character work then becomes a lot more important for me, since, in my opinion, in general fiction especially, a lot of theming would be done through character work and character psychology. So that's me. But so yeah, we share favorites and dislikes, but sometimes we will love a work of literature or dislike one, sometimes for the same reason, but sometimes for slightly different reasons. So maybe could you explain your own hierarchy of literary needs?
Yes, definitely. Mine, it's almost reverse of yours, in a way. The first one is writing style. So it's not so much vocabulary or anything, but the writing style has to be tonally apt to the narrative that is being told. And if it doesn't click, then nothing else matters. So first thing is writing style, both in speculative and in general fiction. Then would be characters. If character work, if it's not interesting, I can occasionally pardon slipshod character work if the plot is really engaging. But if there's nothing absolutely, if they are very, very boring or just been there, done that, then I zone out very easily. Theming is something which, then would be plot actually. So story, definitely. If a book doesn't have plotless, books often bore me. It can be done, but it is very, very difficult to do. I'm also more appreciative of it in general fiction than in speculative fiction. Plotless speculative fiction put me to sleep sometimes. But then would be theming, and the last one is world building. Sometimes I don't get world building until it's pointed out to me, for which I watch channels like yours. I was like, oh yes, this was great. And then I realized, okay, sometimes maybe I internalize it, but I don't, I that's not what I look out for when I read a book.
This is also just because I just thought of this again. It's also because I think you're less of an intrinsic visualizer, right?
Don't visualize at all.
Yeah, that's always something I find interesting when we discuss books, because like you don't visualize, and I'm a very strong visualizer, so I think that probably impacts it as well. But so thanks for explaining that. So now that we've settled this like general basis for the way we approach works of literature, let's get into the meat of it. And Joe Abercrombie's The First Law trilogy. Now, I mentioned in my last reading wrap-up that I spent most of the month of March reading The First Law. I mean, I listened to the audiobooks 90% of the way through, and was flabbergasted by how mediocre I found it. I'm still, like a month later, I just don't get it. I don't get the hype for this one. So first, when exactly did you read it twice? And like, when did you read it again?
Yes, I remembered that I read it. So the first book I've read twice, actually.
Yes. Okay.
So what happened was, I was searching for, this is far before I discovered BookTube, or at least SFFTube. And I was just searching Goodreads lists and best of lists, and trying to avoid A Song of Ice and Fire, because I read King Killer Chronicle first, and I was already sad by its unfinished status. I was like, I'm not getting into that. And Song of Ice and Fire, a lot of the perception comes from the TV show of the elevated violence, and I'm not a big fan of that. So I was the people are like, Abercrombie is grim dark light, and it's very funny. So that's the reason why I read The Blade itself. And my policy at that point was that this is still my policy, actually. If a particular installment in a series does not motivate me, I'm not going to continue the series. So I read The Blade itself in 2022, I think, at some point. Then I just gave up. And then I got into BookTube. I think people in the comments, I was like, I gave up. And they were like, no, you have to read it. And because book 1 is the setup, and then book 2 and book 3 is really good. So I read all 3 books last year in August.
Right.
Then this is not a complete read, but I did start the first book again, listening to it on audio.
Right. Okay.
December of last year, and that was because I didn't get the humor at all, which we'll get into probably.
Yes, we will.
Then somebody who loves the books, they told me that try listening to it, because maybe the narrator's inflections will help you appreciate the British humor. So I said I tried to give it a try, and then we can talk about it. So yes, the whole trilogy once, the first book 2.5 times maybe.
Right. Yeah. But so you read on like through print the entire trilogy, and and then you listened to Blade itself. Okay.
I tried.
You tried, yes.
Which we will
get back to that. Yeah. Yes, because this is an instance of a trilogy we both have a pretty similar opinion of. We both think it's fine, and we don't get the hype for it. Maybe you want to like give a brief general impression of the trilogy, and then we can start going into specifics.
Yes, sure. So actually, the book I liked most was Blade itself, because I thought there was potential, at least. When there is hope for potential, because I didn't know what the next 2 books were.
Hope springs eternal.
I'm going to start spoiling a bit from here. It's difficult.
Yeah, quick. To be very clear, we will not be careful about spoilers. This will be a spoiler-full conversation, because otherwise, what's the point? So, just to be very clear about that, there will be spoilers. Please continue.
Thank you. So, I like the play on Bayaz being anti-Gandalf. I like that a lot.
Yeah.
And I like this scene where they go into the tower with...
Yes.
I was like, maybe something is happening. And this coming together of an unlikely fellowship, the elements are at least interesting. I did think it was very mediocre. In terms of the writing, it was okay. I would say world building is, I wasn't immersed at all. Like, anyway,
yeah.
I'm not a visual reader,
No,
and
yeah,
whatever
but yeah.
detail I got, I didn't. So I was not very motivated to continue. Then, as I said, a lot of booktubers says book 2 and
Yeah.
book 3. Book 3 is the thing. I read it till the end, and what Miriam, I agree with what you said. It's inoffensively fine.
Yes.
It was, I read it. It was a thing I did.
It was a thing and I read it. Yeah, yeah.
But I don't think I would have been significantly worse off if I hadn't.
Exactly.
So I have very little to say. I mean, I can talk about things, of course, but I have very little to say in the way of even disliking something where, when sometimes we get enraged about a book, we talk about it for hours or something. It's not even like that.
No.
It's just, yes, I mean, this exists. I acknowledge its existence. That was me. So in terms of rating scale on 10, I would give it 6 to 6.5, maybe 6.
Yeah, that sounds about right. I think for me it's like 5.5 or 6 as a whole. Because for me, it's just the whole was less than the sum of its parts. Do you have anything specific you want to say about the prose? Like, I think the prose is fine. I call it utilitarian. It didn't really buy anything for me. I will say, not that I mind as such, but there is a lot of just kind of random swearing. Because doesn't the book open up with shit, like an expletive or something like that? I'm kind of like, okay, whatever. But so the prose I was just kind of, it's fine, whatever.
I agree, it's fine. Two things. One thing is I'm a bit more sensitive to slang, so I don't like it very much.
Oh, of course,
So it bugged me more.
Yeah,
and the second thing is, this is related to character work, so better to talk about it more there. But there were certain quips which really, they became like ticks to me. So, and it ties into this whole thing of, I sympathize that this was a debut work, and some of that is just the work, the author trying, but it's just trying way too hard. And I can appreciate that effort when it works, but when it doesn't work, it's just like,
it's annoying.
Again, this, yes. And that's the thing, like, I wish I could be even, very fervently annoyed. I'm not even that. I'm just like, again, this. Yes. Okay, moving on. So, as you said, one word, fine.
Because it's interesting, because we're also kind of just maybe going to compare and contrast to other works of high fantasy that we both enjoyed. I think the Legendarium it's a very specific prose style. I think it's very poetic in places, and I mean, linguistics was Tolkien's thing.
Yes.
Right. So like that there's like a very musical quality to a lot of the prose in the Legendarium. That's King Killer, I think, is beautifully. I think there's also a lot of musicality to the prose of King Killer, which
for
is
me
nice
as well.
Yeah, because the main character is a musician too, so I think that's a nice kind of resonance. As far as Ice and Fire,
this is why,
that's
for me,
difficult for me. Yeah,
it's tonally apt to the story being told.
Yes, I agree.
And for me, I will say that there are one or two things which bugged me a bit in, I would say, Feast and for example, Nunkles, and I was just like, why did Uncle become Nunkle?
Yeah, I don't know.
that was just a weird authority, but beyond maybe the world is so vast, the potential for immersion is so much that these are minor quibbles.
Yes.
Because there's so much else to appreciate personally for me, and even more on rereads. That's another thing which, I would say in terms of general impression of the First Law, if somebody asked me to reread, I just don't want to.
No, exactly. It's like,
because I can't think of anything I would get out of that experience. Whereas,
no, I agree.
Even for a book that I hated, sometimes if somebody convinces me, but that's the sad thing about meh books, I think, even more than books that one dislikes.
Yes.
That it's just like, I just don't want to revisit this experience, not in, oh my God, this was so horrible way. Yeah, it was fine. It's done. Bye.
I think I wonder, the thought just occurred to me, maybe it's partly because you know how human memory is very strongly tied to emotional impact.
Mm-hmm.
So both loving and hating a thing is going to stick in our minds a lot more than very something true. That was just kind of like, it's meh. Blah.
Yes.
Now, So I listened to the entire trilogy. I did the whole Stephen Pacey narration. We have a fairly different opinion about it, right? Although I know most people are like, it's freaking amazing, and it's just
best
amazing.
narrator
best narrator ever. I found it good overall. That being said, I pointed this out in my reading wrap up and my review on Goodreads. One thing that really annoyed me about his performance, he used so many different accents, and I'm just very sensitive to accents, and I have an ear for them. But the problem is the way the accents were like distributed. There were people like the Northmen crew had like a few different accents between them, and I'm like, but isn't this a unified cultural group? Why do they all sound different? And so I already thought, and we'll get back to the world building, was garbage, and I stand by that. It's just okay. But then, so I'm getting nothing in terms of world building. I'm not being immersed in this world. There's no sense of culture, ethnicity, just texture and world building. And then you throw in this mishmash of, it's like a cosmopolitan setting when you're mixing that many accents. And I'm like, whoa, what is this? I don't know. I found it disorientating, and just it made the world building worse than it already was because of the text itself. I don't know. I haven't seen anyone else point this out. Maybe I'm the only one on Earth. I mean, I doubt it, but like that's the impression I got. But so that to me is a huge problem with the narration. Otherwise, I did like it. I thought there was a lot of personality given to the character voices and stuff. But you actually didn't really like it at all, if I remember correctly.
No, I started, and the first part, which starts with Logan, is all right. And then we got to the Glokta chapter, and the voice acting just grated on my nerves. It's too much. The thing with audiobooks is I like a lot of audiobooks, but I think it depends on the narrator how much of the narration becomes an interpretation. And for me, here, he is, because I read the text first in some print, in ebook format. Yeah. For me, Pacey was just imbuing it with too much interpretation for my liking. I appreciate subtle voice acting. For example, in Kingkiller, which I'm listening to now, and
nice.
Wiseman's Fair, Nick Podell, he's doing. He does these, and again the accents are cleverly done, so the students from different parts and different of the university. I'm not going to be spoiling any Kingkiller thing, just
no, but I
they're different students, so that is clever, but he also doesn't overdo it. No. So for me, and of course Kingkiller is first person narration, so it helps, but with multi POV, and Glokta is a pretty major character, so that's when I stopped, because listening to that overall, anyway, this is again what happened to you with world building. Maybe it's interesting that probably happened to me with the character, because for me, the way Glokta is written, he has these quips. It's like, see what I did there? Yeah. See what I did there? And on top of that, Pacey doing that is just like double. I was supposed to enjoy the humor, but instead I got even more annoyed. At least in text form.
Yeah, that makes sense.
So yeah, not a fan. I mean, I stopped listening. I don't get it. That's just a personal thing.
No, it's totally fair. But I completely agree though with the narration, because I did significant parts of Name of the Wind and The Wise Man's Fear on audio as well. I mixed the two. I love the narration. And I agree, but the narrator does accents, but he places them intelligently. There, it's very well integrated into the story and world building. So I was like, that's perfect. And with Stephen Pacey, I was like, no, you're doing too much here, and it's okay. Although you have not done the audiobooks for Song of Ice and Fire, right?
I have not, and I'm a bit scared. I want to, but I'm also a bit scared too, because there's a pronunciation of a particular character, Littlefinger. And I'm pretty scared, because Muriel has told me this already. So for everyone listening, and I'm just terrified, because that is the kind of thing that I cannot unhear. What Muriel describes about being a visual reader, I'm hypersensitive to sound.
Yeah, okay, that makes sense. Yeah.
So if something like that sticks, I cannot. and I know this is somebody who has won awards for his performance.
In my opinion, it's not terrible. I think some people find it terrible. I don't think it's terrible. It's just I would not recommend it for someone who's reading A Song of Ice and Fire for the first time. I think for me, it was like, it's fine. I'm not bothered that much because it was my second reread. I think a large part of that reread through audiobooks I did at my drawing class. So I was drawing at the same time, and I was kind of just in the zone. And it's like, okay, he pronounces Peter Baelish Pitaya, and I'm like, ow. I don't want to speak ill of the dead. This man has passed away. Okay, rest in peace. But how did you get Pitaya out of those letters? I don't know. But yeah.
What happened in production that this?
Yeah, I don't know.
Anyway, it is what it is. I would like to try it, but it's not a huge priority because
no, that's fair.
I just recently finished Nobody Laugh, my 5th read. This is totally regular behavior.
Based. It is. I can confirm. I think it's based. So make of that what you will. I think it's great. More power to you. Do you want to move? So shall we move on to? I kind of wrote it down as plot and pacing and structure and stuff.
It's plot or lack thereof.
Lack thereof, rather. Yeah. I will give the fans this. I think even the most, I don't want to say rabid fans. That's not, but like the most adoring of fans.
Yeah.
I think even they will happily acknowledge that the first law is not plot driven.
Yeah, definitely.
I think even they will say. They might not say world building is garbage exactly, but they'll say it's not the series' strong suit.
Yeah,
it's like a character-driven work of grim. We'll come back to the label of grimdark, but grimdark fantasy. Okay, book 1 was like 600 pages. I'm going off of ebook structure, but like I guess the trilogy as a whole is what 1800.
1700. Yeah, I was gonna say maybe 1700.
Yeah, pages, and I'm like, there's so much nothing.
Again, yes. Yeah. And I mean, I think to compare with one of my favorites, Kingkiller, it is exactly 1700 pages. Name of the Wind is 700 and Wise Man's Fear is 1000. And we have more to come. So there's 2 books. And so in case, people definitely can make a point that what the hell you're saying he finished the trilogy in 1700 pages. This is where I say that the writing style is key. Rothfuss's writing is such that I don't mind that it's 1700 pages. I will acknowledge that Wise Man's Fear could be easily cut down by 30%, but I don't mind it. Here I mind it because what happens is once the writing style doesn't click for me, I start to nitpick and then I start to build quibbles, and then those quibbles start getting amplified. And of course, this can turn around at any moment. If had the second and even the third books been better for me than the first book, a lot of this would have been mitigated. But because the writing was sort of, a flat line, it's just fine, it's just carrying. But there is no story it is carrying. So there's a lot of pressure on the other elements. So writing is just plain average. World building we'll get to, but let's say writing is like the baseline, it's okay. So a lot of pressure on the other elements to create something that gives that wow factor. But in terms of plot, according to me, there is nothing. I was so annoyed by the end because
the ending. Oh my god!
I don't know how to say this, but even the end of Before They Are Hanged, it feels like haha.
Yes, see, it's like haha. See what I did there? Like
and
okay.
Given this was my primer gripe with the writing style. For example, in Glokta's POV chapters, some of them doubling down on that, using the plot and the theming is just like, why? Actually, this is my main question after I finish the trilogy. Why? Why? What was the purpose of this story? If the purpose is that life is meaningless or that trying is meaningless because the system is too strong, it is not a position I align with ideologically.
Yeah, neither do I.
Even if I don't align with it ideologically, if it was done well, if it was truly committed to, I could probably appreciate it more. but it just felt very, and so I was also like, okay.
Yeah, I'm actually I'm gonna say something a bit spicy, I guess, a spicy take to myself actually. Even though I loathed Blindside, and I would say in terms of like what it's actually doing and how it accomplished what it's doing, and the things it says, I mean the things I read into it or out of it, I hated it, and I rated it significantly lower than something like First Law. But at least I can kind of give a point to something like Blindside for exploring an idea and actually trying to do something a bit different. I think it fails at what it's trying to do, but it's trying to do it. And with like First Law, I feel like, I mean, I guess I'll get back to this in terms of theming, but it's kind of like, what exactly are you trying to do? Because it's just so tasteless. I don't, but it's inoffensively tasteless.
It's what I mean. If people watch, at least I think I used to watch a lot of Gordon Ramsay, these episodes. Kitchen Nightmares and whatever. And sometimes this is a very common complaint of his. He'll go in and he tasted this and he's like, it's bland, no seasoning, no nothing. And that's what I feel. It's so bland. It just needs a bit of seasoning, and that seasoning is not through violence or through murder. It's through something, either something exploration of the psyche, so maybe the character work, or something, but not a twist. Not because, yes, you can say that there are twists, but these are not twists because they are twists of nothingness. So the twist is that there is nothing. So I'm like, okay, but then what? And I think that's where, then that's where, before they are hanged, and even more the last argument of Kings, it left me with this mystified sense that I understand what you are trying to do, perhaps, in my opinion. But then what? If a story is entirely subversion, anti-end, but then what is your proposed, especially given its fiction, especially given its speculative fiction, which is all about letting your imagination run free. So even if it is a very, it's a word which is codified by this system or by this evil power, you can say, bias, even then, what is your proposed alternative? Because the alternative that he ends with, which is that everybody accepts the system, is boring. I'm sorry, it's just boring.
Yes, my overarching impression of like the whole of it, outside of its constituent parts, I was like, this story, such as it was, is relying so heavily on subversion for subversion's sake. But you need more than that. And I was like, again, no offense to anyone who loves First Law. More power to you. I'm not trying to. We're not trying to take this away from anyone who loves First Law, and we didn't hate it. To be very clear, once again, but I'm kind of like, there was like a point, because like book one, very quickly I was like, it feels like someone very obviously trying to subvert Fellowship of the Ring, with maybe some, I don't know really about the timeline, but like some characters felt like they were analogs for like characters in the Song of Ice and Fire, but then the plot itself was like, you're trying to do Fellowship but grim dark, I guess, and even then I'm like, is it really that grim dark? I guess if grim dark relies on a lot of nihilism, then yeah. But I don't know, I feel like I've encountered more violent and overtly violent and depressing works, but okay, fine, whatever. Once I was like, okay, that's what you're trying to do, and we'll get back to this with the characters, with Baez is subverted Gandalf, Giselle is subverted Aragorn, I think. Logan is subverted Jon Snow.
That's hilarious. Who is Pharaoh?
Yeah, I was trying to think of that. Who the hell is Pharaoh? I'll have to think about that one. And so, okay, but I don't know, to me, it felt a bit too on the nose in places. And then like the ending of before they are hanged, with the whole thing with the stone, and it's like, haha, psych, actually the ghost had a fake stone and y'all trekked here over 6 months. I did not, maybe I wasn't paying close enough attention, I'm willing to admit that was on me, but like I was like, 6 months passed in the book, really? Okay. So we trekked, we voyaged, we fellowshipped for 6 months, all to have a fake stone, and we all have to go home empty-handed. And it's like, yeah, okay, I see what you did there. It's like the quest was meaningless. Yay! I'm just kind of, I'm like, okay, but I wasn't even that mad about it. It's just kind of like, yikes.
Yeah,
you did it. I guess cool. I mean, but the pacing, though, that's the thing. Because the story is very much like setup. Book 1 is just setup, right? It's fellowship, but grimdark, whatever. Although there's that weird escalation of violence at the end. I remember like messaging you about that. I was like, what just happened? I don't think it's, you can enjoy that or not enjoy that. I think that's a question of personal preference. I've encountered this now a few times in novels. I'm not a super big fan of like nothing happens and like the last 10% it's like huge spike in activity. I'm kind of like, I guess it's the way of making that work for me. But in the books, because that happened in Tagana as well, and I was like, oh well, that escalated quickly. What just happened? I'm not a big fan of that very uneven pacing, but you know, to each their own. And yeah, it's just so much nothing. It's so much nothing interrupted by, haha, we done a subversion, like D&D from Game of Thrones, kind of. I mean, not quite as bad because I fucking adore, and we both adore Song of Ice and Fire. You were spared the trauma of seasons 7 and 8. So
I've watched,
bless your heart.
I've watched YouTube videos enough to know what happens, but I didn't actually have to see it. And as one of our friends was saying, you know, to watch it for 8 years and then see that is a special kind of hell.
I'm still mad about it. I'm still mad about it. But here was kind of like, and yeah, in the last argument of Kings, it's just the whole, oh, haha, Logan ends up right back where he started, because it's a loop, folks. It's a loop but it's a loop of meaninglessness, right? It's like life is meaningless and it loops back around.
Yeah, okay. And that's the thing, like in book 2, it seems like Logan and Pharaoh are having a bit of growth, like they're all having growth.
Yes, they were.
And then in book 3, Pharaoh sort of recedes into nothingness. Logan is back where he started. Even Jezal, he's taken down by the system. Glokta, taken down by the system. As you said, I think we discussed this. I agree with you. Glokta and RD is probably the closest thing we got to some kind of. Here's I mean, this is a difficult question which I haven't been able to summarize yet properly. So if somebody asks me or asks you, what is the First Law trilogy about?
Life is the nihilism we met along the way.
I remember a video from Library of Alexandria where I think it was a very old TBR booktuber. So he says that, you know, whenever somebody says about the First Law trilogy and you ask them, well, what is it about? And people say, oh, but the characters are so great. The characters. He's like, yes, but what is it about? Oh, the characters. The characters. He memed about it, but it's true. It's quite difficult to summarize the First Law trilogy because the plot is that, and again, the structure is there. So, for example, it starts with the end and it ends with the beginning. And so theoretically, it should, I mean, if he's trying to say that it loops, it doesn't really, it's not committed to in any way, for me at least.
No, I agree. That's why I said I was like, it's the whole, I mean, I was memeing a bit, but it's kind of like, yeah, life is meaninglessly random, randomly violent, and violently meaningless. But even if you accept that, I guess this touches upon theming, but I mean, there's not much to say about theming in any case. I'm kind of like, even if you accept that that's kind of what it's saying, it's a very kind of wishy-washy I like the word milquetoast for this. Milquetoast version, because it's not even making that point that forcefully. It's kind of like, I guess it's kind of saying that sort of haha subversion for the win. Yeah.
I did worry. I did worry a little when I was thinking about this. That am I being snobby? Because I love entertainment based, a lot of entertainment based.
Yeah.
Except this wasn't entertaining. That's
Right.
the thing.
Exactly.
Because I don't know. Maybe because it's like ideologically, I'm so at odds with the basic thesis of the trilogy, or that the story wasn't that interesting, or it could be that, as you said, it wasn't committed to enough to really make me sit up and say, "Oh wow, this." So it was just, as you said, very wishy-washy, and I didn't find this even as entertaining, because this is true. A lot of people say that why does everything have to be deep? Absolutely.
No, it doesn't.
I would love to have a good time, but I didn't have a good time.
No, exactly. Because like generally, I prefer to just actively seek out books that will make me think and or feel.
You're a theme snob. Admit it.
I'm a theme snob, yes. But I love the Kaiju Preservation Society. That was just so much fun. Like that was, and it's something I could see myself rereading. That was just so much fun. Like if there was a special illustrated edition, I'd buy that immediately. Because it's just, I want to see the giant Kaijus illustrated as well.
I was just going to say, you just want to see the Kaijus.
I just want to see.
That's totally different.
That's entirely true. That's entirely. If a TV show is actually made of it, I'm going to watch that 1,000%. And that's just more fun than anything else. It's a lot of like nerdy referential humor that is well placed, and it's kind of like it's a romp with kaiju. And I'm like, that's entertainment driven 1,000%, and I loved it. But I knew that's what I was getting into. So at first law, I guess there were a couple moments where I was kind of like, I would say this Abercrombie can write action scenes.
Oh yes, that's again one thing because I'm not a visual reader. Those parts just go like I'm so thankful to Tolkien for summarizing his battle scenes in 2 pages. People complain about that. I'm like, thank you, because even if you went off, I wouldn't.
But I guess I don't really care so much, but I can say I think it's competently written.
Yeah, I agree.
So if someone enjoys that, I think it's well done. Actually, before we move on to world building, but there won't be much to say about that. I did want to come back to, because you mentioned this with Kingkiller, and it's the same thing. What's different with A Song of Ice and Fire? Song of Ice and Fire is also just huge.
Scope is
right?
Huge.
It's just huge, right? Or even the Legendarium, though it's doing it in a very different way, tonally and just structurally, I guess. Kingkiller, I agree, is very slow. It's a slow. Or I mean, actually, it's another novel. It's not high fantasy, and it's definitely not secondary world. It's historical fantasy, like the Mists of Avalon, which you appreciate as well. I think
I liked it a lot. I think so far it's the best Arthurian retelling I've read.
Right, yeah.
Of the ones I've read.
It's very slow in places. Like it is, and it's huge, and it's very slow in places.
Yes.
Kingkiller is very slow in places, and I agree. I love that stuff, but I completely understand why someone would be. It's very indulgent with the world building in places. That's entirely fair. But I'm like learning things and getting immersed in the texture of the world. A Song of Ice and Fire has some very slow bits in it. Feast for Crows, famously, though I am a great defender of A Feast for Crows. I think it doesn't get enough love in the fandom. I will die on that hill.
You convinced me. I mean, convinced me to reread it, and I agree. Especially if you read Feast and Dance, which I did. I think I mentioned this. I did the combined reading order this time. It works really, really well.
Yeah.
Actually, parts of Dance feel slow, but Feast is fine.
Right.
Actually.
But there's so much going on. There's so much going on with the characters.
That's the thing. There's opportunity. And I'm not a visual reader. You are a visual reader. But even then, both of us being different, all the 3 texts you mentioned, there's opportunity for imagination to soar in different ways.
Yes. And the same with the Legendarium, of course. Because I'm not really so... I'm not... That's why I know that's like maybe less common in the Legendarium fandom. I'm like a Silmarillion stan. That's my... Tolkien book.
That's really uncommon.
I know it's uncommon, but like that's my Legendary book. But there's just, even Lord of the Rings, there's just something about the writing. It's both good and bad for me, because I do think it places a certain distance with the reader. At least that's how I perceived it.
Okay.
But you just feel that you're in this grand story with a history, an internal history, and there's a temporality and the geography and the ecology. I mean, just the flowers, the animals, the gods, or I mean, the deities. You know what I mean? It's just you feel it's real. It's just like somewhere out there in the parallel universe where all of humanity's imagined worlds exist. And I went on a weird tangent there. But like it's there, it's real.
It's there. And even something like the wizarding world of Hogwarts.
Yeah.
I want to live
even
there.
Even Earthsea, honestly.
Earthsea very much. And Earthsea, I mean, this is the thing that you don't have to go on for pages, but then Le Guin is Le Guin. But yes, it's 200 pages. The first 3 are teeny tiny, and Tihano and even the Tales from Earthsea is the one where she gets into a bit of older lore and things like that. But otherwise, it's all there, and you can feel it. She doesn't give so much detail as a lot of other people do, but the world is very, very deep. Here again, so I guess we are moving on a bit to world building now.
Yeah.
Has such. So I mean, I think we talked about this once. I can't remember who it was who said it. Maybe it was something I read on Reddit, where it's like immersion in a secondary world fantasy primarily depends on how much the author has thought. They don't have to give us all the details, but if you are walking about, let's say theoretically, it should not be that you hit a place and then there's a green screen.
Yeah.
If you have a green screen, then that's where immersion breaks.
I think I remember I brought up video games as actually a parallel.
Yes.
Yeah.
So I think maybe, then it was. And with Legendarium, I have never felt a green screen.
No.
With A Song of Ice and Fire, never. Kingkiller, I must admit, I'm heavily biased. I'm heavily too biased to have any kind of objective thing, but I never felt a green screen. With Abercrombie, again, if the author, that is not his motive, I get it. But my question is then why make it secondary world fantasy at all?
Yeah.
That's another, again, of course, the author can write whatever they want to, but when I'm perceiving the text as a reader, sometimes I do think that why is this fantasy, or why did this need to be fantasy? For first law, I'm not sure I have a good answer.
No, I don't either. Because actually, before it flies out of my head, I just thought of this metaphor, especially with Earthsea, because they are short books, right? And I mean, Le Guin, and then there are other writers like this who have nailed the art of creating short but dense works of speculative fiction. So it's like, imagine a pool of water. It's a relatively, like, the opening of the pool is relatively small, but then it goes deep into this like big aquifer. With something like First Law, it feels like, okay, you got a big pool, but it's like this deep. Sorry.
That's hilarious, but I think for me it bothered me less than you, because for you read it this primarily because of for me it bothered me less, but yes, I don't disagree. So what was it like?
And that's entirely on me, the whole, because I've been reading, although I will be done this year, some remaining recommendations from my ex. Personal thing. And so because I had told him, and he knew I need me that world building and theming and speculative literature. I had read or heard, listened from various sources. First Law is not about world building. That's fine. You just write whatever you like. That's fine. Okay, to each their own. So other people can enjoy it. I'm not a character-driven reader, so I'm not going to bother with this one. Obviously, and then my ex was like, But there's. Now I think he should. Honestly, if I'm being perfectly honest, I think it's because he was trying to emulate aspects of the writing style, so he wanted me to be familiar with it. I don't know. It doesn't matter. It's true though. The world building is garbage. But again, it's not. It's like I said in my wrap up. It's not offensive, but nothing is like offense. It's not like with Blindside where I was like borderline offended in places. But anyway, I wasn't offended. He didn't do anything bad. It's just it's a nothing bug.
He didn't do anything.
It's a nothing bug.
He didn't do anything.
It's like the cultures, and this is, I will liberally shout out to intertextual attention for teaching me that expression Fantasylandia for like a very generic, bland fantasy setting. I kind of like that. It was very Fantasylandia. You got your Northern Europeans, Angland, but I'm kind of like Angland. It's just one letter removed from England. I mean, again, I wish Joe Abercrombie the best. He has a lot of success. Have a happy life. Nothing against the man, but like England, really, okay. And then that's something my boyfriend, my lovely boyfriend, pointed out. Oh, Gurkish, it sounds like Turkish. And indeed, when you actually kind of think about how the Gurkish are described, it's kind of like this generic Near Eastern next to fake Europe. So it's like fake Turkey next to fake Europe and England. It's just kind of like...
I didn't like the Gurkish depiction too much, to be honest.
And then the Northmen. Okay, so they're the Germans, Vikings.
I was going to say maybe Vikings, but that's just from popular culture reference. I have no idea.
Yeah, I don't know.
They don't sound right. They don't sound like Viking. I don't know exactly what was that. It was something, some...
And then you had the... What did they call them, actually? Like the orc equivalents?
Shanka.
The Shanka. I was like, what are they? Because like they're never... I was like, what are they? And then you kind of... I guess... They're kind of like artificially created critters, kind of. But that's the thing, though. The actual fantasy element is so uncommitted to. You get a tiny bit of like deep lore or deeper lore with the whole. There was like a god, and like the world of the spirits and demons, and the world of like the living was like one world, and then it was separated, and then you had like a god who had children and every time they're less divine or demonic, blah blah blah, and Pharaoh's like still like one part per million demonic or something, but it's like nothing. You don't get a sense of like how does this world work? What do people believe? That's also the thing. The absence of religion. It's just religion is not really described at all. Very little, like a little bit with the Gurkish, we kind of like, what do people believe? What are their values? What are their cultural hallmarks? And that's the thing, though, because obviously, and I was like, oh, but you can write this stuff. Because I think we both enjoyed when Baez and friends go into this tower.
Yeah, that was the one part where I was like, ooh, is there going to be more of this?
Yeah, and it was well written. It was like atmospheric and like, oh, what's happening? Mysteries, ooh. And like, that's cool. Like, can we have more of that now? Yeah.
No, I was just about to say.
So like, what was the point? Like, to your point, what was the point of making it fantasy?
I don't have a good answer so far. Beyond, no, actually, I don't have a good answer at all. Beyond, you need the help of magic for someone like Baez to have, absolute power.
Yeah.
I mean, in a real world situation, how would a sort of not global but in-world global all-encompassing dictator survive without magic? So magic is sort of the hold that he has to manipulate everything. So yes, very much anti-Gandalf, where Gandalf only does it for good, and he knows the real limits, where he's almost like to Frodo, no, don't give me the ring. Or even Galadriel says that, oh my god, you will get, instead of Sauron, you will get this evil queen in Lothlorien, when Frodo and she have a conversation. So here Baez is, he would have taken the ring and danced around with it. But we already have Saruman, though. We already have Saruman in Lord of the Rings. So I think Tolkien kind of... I'm not saying Baez is my favorite character in the First Law so far. He's the one I found the most interesting. But that's the only reason I can think of, that you need that, which is again interest. I want to make this point. A lot of fantasy worlds, high fantasy worlds, where there's a lot of magic, they risk being overpowered by magic, because anything goes, especially in soft magic systems or even in hard magic systems. It seems like everybody can do magic and there's no limits on their magic. This is actually, despite being a low magic world, I mean, a lot of people recommend First Law if people don't like too much magic.
It actually has a similar problem.
It has, it takes it like to the maximum because the entire plot pivots on that thing.
Yes,
it's the ultimate Deus Ex Machina.
Yes, actually, I think we same brain there because I was thinking that it's actually doing the thing that stories that rely too much on a lot of magic do. It has the thing, bro. Oh my god, mind blow. Yes, absolutely. Wow, wow. Yeah, you're right though. Oh wow. That's amazing. You're right. Yeah, you're right.
But I would just say that is not an interesting application of magic to me. That's a personal preference as a reader. But I don't mind even unlimited magic. It's fine. But again, then if the person can do anything, where is the opposing mage or something to counter that? So Bayaz was playing the strings all along. This is, and his main source is he has knowledge of. So I guess I don't know how to sort of put a spin on this. Knowledge is power. I don't.
Yeah, and I guess honestly we already kind of covered the theming, and I mean I don't think there was much of it, right? I mean there's the whole nihilism light. Power corrupts, and absolute power corrupts absolutely. Blah blah blah. If you want that, read Dune. It's 1,000 times. Yeah, I'm just being me. Okay, fine. And then it's kind of like I guess Bayaz kind of invents capitalism. It's kind of how I understood it. I was like,
yes, true.
Right? But then why? And that's okay. The fact that I'm asking why is the reason why I said in my wrap up, I don't think the character work in First Law is that good.
I would very much agree. And the funny part is here, I'm supposed to be a character-driven reader. So I love even the characters in Lord of the Rings. I love them. And even the non-character-oriented books, I find something good about the characters, and then that's how I keep going. First Law, most interesting of them is Baz, which again, as you said, still we don't know. Then next one we meet Logan. Logan is interesting, but again, that's because he has mysteries about him that are unsolved. Like his communication with the spirits. None of that is really committed to, and it's all sort of like it comes in when it does, and then it gets dropped. And I guess this is a reader favorite, Glokta. Sometimes compared to Tyrion, which I think is a bit mean because dwarfism and being crippled is, I don't know, it doesn't sit quite right with me.
I guess
the sense of humor, maybe.
In society's eyes, you would face discrimination because of a physical thing, I guess.
Glokta has probably the most potential because he is initially a war hero.
Yes.
Then he becomes a prisoner of war.
Yeah.
And then he becomes a war criminal. And this is probably the most interesting arc. I just think it's not committed to enough. There is so much to do with that. So much to do with that, and it's not. And then I don't want to go on too much into this because Abercrombie has said that this is a weakness and he got better apparently.
I've read that too.
But Pharaoh, why was she there? And if this was the inclusion, then thank you to Tolkien for not writing a fellowship with women.
Oh God, yeah.
Thank you. Because I think it's a bit sad, at least, that Pharaoh, who is a sex slave, is a profession where she is heavily exploited. Ultimately, in the story itself, she's kind of treated as use and throw.
Yeah, basically.
That feels very sad.
Yeah, but the whole...
The last, Jezal, another one, where it's interesting, but again, I think Jezal's growth is actually interesting, but again, it's not committed to enough.
No.
Like the multi-POV thing is fine, but what do we get from it? Because I mean, this is true. In general fiction, maybe you can do it just with character work, but I don't think in speculative fiction, can you pull off a story just with character work, with minimal world building, lackluster prose, lackluster plot?
Not if it's that long.
And you have to then really, really delve into your characters. But I think he uses his characters in a sort of very, what do I say, in a very TV serial way. They behave sometimes, and conversations are a bit like what they would do if they're in a TV serial. It doesn't feel at home with the world all the time. Which character do you like the most, or which ones?
So this is the thing, right? I'm not a character-driven reader. I don't relate easily to characters too, although that's not necessarily an issue for me if I can still find a character interesting. Like, it's an interesting example of a human personality, of human psychology. I don't like them, I don't relate to them, but it's interesting. So I guess going off of that, probably Glockta. I found it interesting to see a portrayal that was, I would say, well handled overall, of like a disabled character.
Yeah, the stairs.
A crippled, disabled man, a war veteran. A lot of times he wants to die because he's in chronic pain, but yet he goes on. I think that would reflect the experience of some real people in the world, of having to deal with all these very difficult infirmities, and it's not pleasant. It's not pretty. I think archetypally, if you want to go with that, he is a kind of in that general category of Tyrion Lannister character, but I think Tyrion Lannister is a way better character and way more interesting. But yeah, and I don't like is the right word, but I found his relationship with RD interesting to follow.
Yes, it was a true partnership.
It was a true partnership.
Much more than Giselle and RD.
Yeah, I mean, RD was probably my favorite secondary character, and I mean, she doesn't. I mean, they do bad things, right? I mean, they torture people, and she gets a bit bloodthirsty. But I mean, at least, like, okay, she was, she was beaten by her dad. She has a lot of resentment about being a woman from a lower social class as well. And there's kind of this friendship that develops between her and Glockta, and then, culminating with, look, I'll marry you and you'll be under my protection, because she's pregnant. And he's like, I guess the moment of vulnerability where she's like, she couldn't possibly accept because I'm so vile and repulsive. And she's like, she's not pretending that she's in love with him or finds him super hot, but she kind of extends this affection. And I was like, okay, I don't know, the way he wrote that, I thought that was believable, and there was something there. So point. And then Bias probably, although at the end I was just kind of like, now you're just kind of evil and capitalism, and you just. But okay, this is the thing. And this is a complaint I also had with Logan. And that's where I'm kind of like, the character work is not that good. I feel like there were just gaps. Holes in character motivation and character building, where I'm kind of like, I don't really understand why they're doing this. Bias at the beginning, especially because he's kind of funny, he's kind of sassy, subverted Gandalf is what I meant. And then I will come back to the humor, but sometimes he acts in a way I'm kind of like, oh, haha, he's being just, he's got that sass and that spice, okay. And then he's just kind of like, I'm the big bad. And I've seen some people be like, he's not, First Lord doesn't have villains and heroes. And I'm like, I mean, yes and no. I both agree and disagree with that. I think Baez is a bit more villainous in the sense that he kind of just fucks everyone over because, I mean, he's a tyrant, basically. He's a tyrant.
Yes.
I guess he thinks he's doing the right thing, but ultimately he's like, democracy is for pussies, dictatorship for the win, and also I'm going to control the world with banks. So capitalism, kind of. But I'm kind of like, why? And then there's this whole thing, what, did he kill his lover back in the ancient day? I wasn't even sure about that. What exactly happened with the Deep Lord? Like, did you kill this princess or woman, whatever? And then he's got this enemy who's like leading the Gurkish, and he kind of just like, but nothing about that was very solid.
There's a lack of cohesion, definitely.
Yeah. And then I guess Logan. But there again, I'm kind of like Logan, because you kind of feel like the arc is going to go in a certain direction. And again, I'm not saying that the story had to have happy endings or that all of the characters should have had insane amounts of growth, because sometimes that doesn't happen to a person for whatever reason. But with Logan, it's the whole, you have Logan, Nine Fingers, and the Bloody Nine. What was the Bloody Nine? Like, this split personality thing, what was that? Like, was he possessed? Was he just crazy? Because, like, he's a berserker, right? Like, that's what it made me think of, like a berserker. He goes into, I have to kill everyone, super violent. But like, why? And what was the point of that exact? I just don't even understand what it accomplished in terms of storytelling, in terms of character building or character arc. I just don't.
I wonder if it would have been better had it been tied into his personal history more, given that he lost so much. But it just wasn't, because part of the story was, or part of the way it was written was, Logan has to get from point A to point B, initially with Kai, and then he goes with Bayaz, and then the other part is these interior things, and they were sometimes in conflict with each other, I felt.
Yeah.
So we don't get a lot of answers, and again, we don't have to know everything, but then there are a lot of things which are sort of hinted at or set up so that you have these reader expectations that, okay, maybe this is why that, and then if you don't get anything on that front and the person reverts to state zero, then it's a feeling of very anticlimax. And a lot of people will say that, yes, that is the point. Well, if that is the point, then I prefer to stay away from that point. That's all I can say.
It's just boring. It's just boring. But then, actually, that's another thing, I think, because I think I told you this. That's another thing with character work. Again, I want to stress this. I don't think the character work was bad. I just don't think it was amazing. And that's how most people, it seems, talk about it. The character work is stellar. I do not think it is stellar. And it's like, for instance, the thing with Logan, you get these glimpses of, he had a wife and he had children who died, and he almost never thinks about them. And when he does think about them, there is so little emotion. It's so detached, and I'm kind of like, I guess you could make a point of he's dissociated, but that's
I was going to say that we have to extend tremendous generosity in our interpretation of the character to sort of make it plausible in our minds, where we have to say that there is tremendous repression, or as you're saying, dissociation, and maybe that leads to this personality. But that is essentially all we are theory crafting. It is not established in the books, and this series is complete. So one way is that, yes, okay, any interpretation works, but then it is actually a gap in storytelling, because why? Again, it has to come together at some point. When I think about this series, I'm chiefly left with a sense of, even about Logan, why? The inexplicable tryst with Pharaoh. That wasn't that a moment, or at least leading up to that moment when he's bonding with this person, wasn't that a moment where he would think about his lost family, or at least feel good? And you can say that, no, this is not a regular person, so but even in that situation, trauma can manifest in a way, and there's probably a clever way to do it, but this just seems like it's a fact. It's a factoid which has been provided, and now we are moving on to another fact.
Yeah, exactly.
I agree that the character work is fine, the sense that it's fine to follow these characters for 3 books, but I don't think it's good. And one thing is that, I mean, you said it's not that good. I personally felt it's not good.
Okay, fair enough.
Because and here comparisons are, multi-POV is very hard to do, definitely.
Yes.
But comparisons come in because this series is pitched all the time, and I mean all the time, that if you like A Song of Ice and Fire, you will like First Law. You will take the other sections, but let me at least take if I just comment a bit on the characters. There is so much texture to each character just in the first book, which is setting up 2 main factions, or you can say 3 main factions: Starks, Lannisters, Targaryens. But even there are so much little things. And if you think about that, a lot of the characters are children. So
yes, absolutely.
Not such developed psyches or
and they feel like
Machiavellian
children
things.
too.
They feel like children, but they observe things or they notice things by the side, which gives you insight into other people who are not POV characters. And again, this is a lot of transitions between scenes and cutting things. So that is truly multi POV exceptional character work.
Yes.
Given that exists, I find it strange to put this as a benchmark for multi POV character voice. Because in First Law, yes, some characters have voices, and you can say even in A Song of Ice and Fire, some characters are done really, really well. Like Tyrion is a reader favorite, and here Glokta is a reader favorite. But none of the characters are ignored or done badly. You can say that some aspects of them are a bit questionable. Like, for example, Dany thinking about her body so much is, I think, something that it's a George R.R. Martin thing rather than a woman being like that thing. But so much about Dany, otherwise that is so interesting. Here, I'm trying to think, R.D. West is interesting, but yeah, I mean, there is a bit of nuance there, where, as you said, the familial abuse, and then from that childhood where the brother is like this, from that to go into this, but not really.
No,
and
really.
If we talk about an actual POV character, Pharaoh, the name, it's related to feral, and sometimes she's given this sort of feral texture. I just find it so strange that there was potential there with which nothing is done. And that's the thing, like, it's not that it is badly done. If you do it badly, you at least attempted it. It's that it's not attempted at all.
No, I agree.
That in terms of character, especially given a multi-POV example exists, which is quite popular, A Song of Ice and Fire. Even other things like other high fantasy, which has a lot more magic. Stormlight Archive has much better character work, in my opinion, than that's probably a spicy take, because some people are like, Brandon Sanderson can't. No, I think Brandon Sanderson. Fair enough. But that's much better. I think Tolkien's characters are much better. Even though Lord of the Rings is emphatically not a character, but his characters are much better.
I mean, honestly, for some characters like the Hobbits, and then there's just so much contextual texture that comes from the world building, and the themes and the grand history of the world. I guess I didn't mention Giselle. Giselle was kind of like there was growth there, and then he just kind of gets fucked over by the system. I'm kind of indifferent to it. Pharaoh is just. I will admit it did not help that in the audiobooks, Pharaoh is given this extremely bizarre French accent. And already I have a whole personal thing with like my French heritage and culture. I'm already kind of biased against that, but it did not mesh with the rest, and I was like, she sounds like such a caricature. It was terrible, and I don't know. Pharaoh's just not good, and fair enough. And I know that Awakami has himself acknowledged that he's had to improve with female characters. Fair enough, fine. But this is also the thing though with the character work. I would say it's above average, whereas something like A Song of Ice and Fire, even Kingkiller Chronicles, although it's a single point of view story, at least A Song of Ice and Fire, which is the work it's First Law is most compared to, I guess. Character work is just S tier.
Yes.
A to S tier, depending on the characters. First Law is like above average. It's like B tier, I guess, for some characters. But that's the thing, though. Given it is a fantasy trilogy, and they're not short. I mean, I guess that's average length for fantasy, but like each book is like 500, 600 pages. Or 700, between 550 and 700 pages. And there's so much nothing plot-wise, so then you expect character to come to the front of everything. But I'm kind of, given the length, given the page count, then it's just not good enough in a way. The character work quality to page count ratio is just not very good, I guess.
That's totally fair. I think I'm a bit more lax on that, because in fantasy, there's just epic fantasy. It's just a code for going on and on.
Yeah, fair enough.
But one of the things that people do tend to go on and on is the world. Here, no option to do that.
No.
So instead, if it's a bit long, it's fine. But yeah, even then, I agree that it's too much. And as I said, that I'm so I was left with such an indifferent feeling that I don't even have anything very harsh to say about it.
No, that's the thing. It was just like,
there are lots of things like this is the author's debut trilogy and etc. etc. So it's not so much that these gaps are deal breakers or things like that. It is just the hype or the frenetic recommendations that come, whether it's from Reddit or from BookTube, that absolutely bamboozle me. That's the part that I really don't get.
Initially, I was like, I'm going to review the first law. And then I read the first one, I was like, well, what do I even say about this? It was just so mediocre.
It exists.
But then, I mean, we talked about it in private, and I did want to discuss it, but more precisely because it is so hyped. And that's why I wanted also to bring in other works of high fantasy, because it's on its own, it's fine, it exists. But this thing is just loved by a lot of people and compared a lot to A Song of Ice and Fire, and I just do not get it. I understand if people like it.
What about,
I can understand if some people love it, because like everyone has their taste. But that so many people love it, that this is considered one of the best works of contemporary fantasy. I don't get it. I just do not get it.
So I commented a bit on the character work between and the contrast between A Song of Ice and Fire and First Law for me personally. What did you think of the world building and the theming wise? Maybe just the first 3 books and First Law.
That's the other thing. I just and to your point, I think was it today you linked.
Yes. There's a post on Reddit. We need to stop recommending. It's a meme.
And I agree. I agree. I just don't get it. Like, and to be fair, Joe Abercrombie has stated, I think publicly, I'm not interested in finishing. Well, first, let's give Mr. Martin the opportunity to finish his series. But were we to be in a situation where he is not able to, and someone wanted to pick up his work posthumously, Joe Abercrombie, I believe, has stated publicly he wouldn't do that. He's not interested. But people say, right, the fandom, or like the fantasy fandom says, yeah, he'd be great to finish A Song of Ice and Fire.
No.
To those people, respectfully, what have you been smoking?
I'm very happy with Dance, up to Dance in that case. Better unfinished than this particular route, in my opinion, because then it's just like the show again. It's not about what happens. It's about how it happens. That's the key thing, and it has to be written in that way. And this is so tonally just not that.
But also, and that's the other thing, I think there seems to be a bit of confusion in the fandom as to whether or not A Song of Ice and Fire is in fact grimdark. I don't think it's grimdark.
It's not. For me, it's not. For me, the definition of grimdark is there has to be nihilism.
Yeah.
So First Law is grimdark, and another trilogy which I've read, which is Prince of Nothing by R. Scott Packer. These are the 2 that I would say are grimdark.
Right.
Song of Ice and Fire is the way it's going, and the way
it's not grimdark.
It's not grimdark even with the show ending. Actually,
no, that's true. It's grim in some places because it shows the horrors of war, of human injustice, of violence, of trauma. But there's also love and hope and people fighting for what is right. Like I guess you could call it realistic in its portrayal of human nature. And I mean, that's Martin's whole thing, right? The human heart in conflict.
I didn't know that Faulkner said that. He's apparently quoting William Faulkner. Yeah, that the only thing worth writing about is what you said, the human heart in conflict with itself.
But it's not grim dark. And I'm like, again, and this is not to each their own, but like for us, and certainly for me, the First Law, the theming is just not there. The world building is absolutely not there. I don't know if it improves much in the second trilogy. I doubt it, but okay. And the character work is just not there. I mean, maybe it's improved since then. I can put that between parentheses, maybe. but it's just not, like, no, absolutely not. They're just completely different works. Like, what are people on about? I don't get that. Absolutely not.
I don't get that.
No.
And the other one is talking about the subversion to Tolkien. I think I mentioned this, that Bias being the anti-Gandalf. Well, Saruman exists in the Lord of the Rings.
Yes, yeah. Exactly.
And the other part is, if you consider the ending of First Law, well, the Return of the King, not ignoring, the movies are great, but they did not include. The Return of the King ends with the scouring of the Shire.
Scourging of the Shire, yeah. With scouring,
so,
yeah.
What can be more heartbreaking than that?
Yeah.
I think there are 30 hobbits lying dead at one point. And anyway, the point is that Tolkien already touched upon some of the things. It's not a story. This is actually mentioned as well. Gandalf says it. Frodo's like, "Why was I chosen?" And Gandalf was like, "Nobody can say. But now that you have been, you just try." So it's not a story of a chosen one fighting the evil lord and, emerging victor. That's a lot of
I
things.
agree. And to be honest, I will be the first to say I do think sometimes morality, if you want to call it that, in the Legendarium, sometimes for my taste is a bit too Manichaean or simplistic. But it is not as simplistic as I believe a lot of people make it out to be.
Fair enough. Especially with your favorite Legendarium book.
Yeah, and like
nasty.
I mean, to me, and I think I mentioned this when I discussed reading, like in a wrap up when I read Kingkiller. I was like, Kingkiller for me tonally is kind of between the Legendarium and A Song of Ice and Fire. But even with that said, the Legendarium has more nuance than I think a lot of fantasy readers give it credit for. Because, like you said,
Lord of the Rings stands, so too biased.
Yeah, but so there is the scouring of the Shire, which, it's like, when you've been through conflict and war, it's not just rainbows and unicorns. Like
the last part is Frodo can't.
Consequences, right? And when Frodo leaves, right? I mean, it's very heartbreaking in a lot of ways. So I did want to say that, like, myself, I have maybe, like, in terms of like real moral realism, I would give a greater point to something like Kingkiller or Song of Ice and Fire, but I will be the first to say that there is a fair bit of nuance in the Legendarium itself as well. I think people maybe lose sight of that sometimes. I don't know. Do we want to maybe conclude on the humor or lack thereof?
I didn't get it, and
admittedly,
I don't think it's that funny.
Yeah, neither do I. I will say, and because I remember, because I did send a message onto Discord and I tagged you. I did laugh a lot at the end of the blade itself. A large part of that was just sheer surprise, because again, there's like that big spike of activity. There's like Logan and Pharaoh fight zombies, Shank, or whatever. Yeah. Also, just as an FYI, I called that they would fuck. I was like, they gonna smash. I just called it, and I was right. Yeah, but then I kind of had a semi hope that it would go somewhere, and it didn't. But I was like, they're definitely gonna get in bed together. Anyway, so lots of violence. Logan goes nuts, must kill everything. Pharaoh kind of pulls him out of it a bit. Okay, they bond over violence. Yay. And then, the whole thing with Baez, who comes, they were on a boat, I guess, and Inquisitors are sent, or people from the government, basically. I don't even care about the details. And it's like, no, we're going to arrest you, blah, blah. And Baez strolls out of the bath naked, this like super old wizard, and he's like, okay, you know what? I'm sick of this shit now. Splash. I was like, I burst out laughing. I was like, what just happened? It's just so. That's why I compared it to manga. I haven't even really read manga, but I watched some anime, and it felt anime-esque, just this kind of like over-the-top, borderline absurd escalation of violence that's goofy in a way, because it's like, okay, old naked man got big mad and just exploded a dude or a woman, whatever. That was a lot in a short amount of time. So that was funny, haha. There were moments here and there where, like, I could sort of appreciate Glocta's sarcasm.
Yeah, I was going to say Glocta's sarcasm is nice, but do you think it's enough to sort of recommend the series based on the humor for you personally?
In all fairness, I feel like humor, I mean, everything is down to personal preference, but I do feel
humor is one of the most.
With humor and smut, completely different, but smut and humor specifically, I feel like that is just so very specific to like personal preference. So fair enough. The one thing where I'm just kind of like a bit confused, I'm not entirely sure I've seen this coming more from like American readers and reviews or not. I should have paid more attention, but I have this feeling, but I could be completely wrong. Like, oh yeah, that dry British humor. Like, I guess not. I don't know. I'm confused because, like, again, and I said this in the wrap up as well. I'm a big fan of British humor and dark humor, and like, I love the class for me classics: Fawlty Tower, Blackadder, Monty Python, etc. First Law was not that funny. Okay. But yeah, no, I don't get that.
For me, two fictional examples. One would be P.G. Wodehouse, who is hilarious, and he's he's all about this aristocratic, these people are so dumb humor. And the other one is a book you've actually read, Jonathan Strange and Mr. Norrell, where there is a lot
funny. Yeah, I agree.
She's just like, have you seen this dumb dumps? So that is actually very wry British humor, and it's very understated.
I would agree, actually. Yes, absolutely.
This First Law felt a bit overstated for me, and again, it was not funny. Like, if a joke is overstated and it's funny, then you can at least laugh. But as you said, if it wasn't funny, then I don't know what to do. But again, I'm partially.
No, but that's a really good point, actually, because now that you brought it up, I do remember thinking it did have that like wry, dry British feel, especially combined with the faux 19th century vibes.
Yeah, the social commentary.
Yeah,
she was trying to be Austen, maybe.
I didn't love it as much as you do, but I still enjoyed it. And yeah, definitely. Now, in terms of like haha funny, though not specifically British humor, I think the Kaiju Preservation Society is funny in a very like specifically like referential way of like nerd culture. That's why I like to compare
knows what it's doing.
It knows what it's doing.
Yeah.
I think The Magicians has a decent bit of dark humor in places. I wouldn't consider it.
Yes.
Yeah.
Elliot, yes.
So I really enjoyed that with The Magicians. Now, A Confederacy of Dunces by John Kennedy too is a comedy, and I was surprised because I enjoyed it. I did find it funny.
Especially in Hollow Kingdom is hilarious at times.
Actually, yeah.
I like that.
But First Law,
it was. I agree. That one is really personal. I mean, that is something to add to where people say that, we don't want to read grimdark, and people say, no, it's funny, it's comedic. I didn't find it comedic because I don't find nihilism comedic. I find nihilism very depressing, and the end is it is that. I guess because the other things were not delivering so much that once I become meh, then I'm just, and that starts with the writing style. The writing style is a flat line. Character for me is below the flat line. World building, I don't care, so I can't say anything. Theming is below the flat line because I don't agree with it. And plot is again flat line. So
line.
6.
So
that was disappointing. I definitely don't get the subversion on the Legendarium because again, it was not committed to the what if solution was not profit. And the second part is A Song of Ice and Fire. I'm totally baffled. Having just finished the reread, I'm
baffled. Yes, we both found it incredibly mediocre, which is fine. Inoffensively mediocre, but we do not get the hype. So I think I said everything I wanted to. I don't know if you wanted to add something.
Read Lord of the Rings and read A Song of Ice and Fire. Great books.
Yes, that's the moral of the story. But once again, like if people watching like the First Law, more power to you. It just clearly wasn't for us. Thank you so much for the lovely discussion. This was loads of fun. Definitely hope we can do this again.
Thank you so much for having me. I had loads of fun as well. Hopefully we can do this again. And for people who want to get in touch with Muriel, obviously they know where to get in touch with her.
They know where to find me.
And I can be found on Muriel's Discord server, the link to which is usually enclosed in the
Yes, I try and do my best. So on that final note, thanks to everyone for watching. Thank you for the continued support. I hope you all have a lovely day, evening, or whichever time of day you prefer, as usual. And yeah, I'll see you all at some point, hopefully not too long, in the next video. But until then, bye everyone.